Um, Thanks everybody for taking the time to join the webinar today. We're from Mattermost, the open source messaging platform, and we're going to talk about DevOps collaboration for remote teams. I'm John Thompson. I'm a Director of Solution Architecture at Mattermost, so I help customers from initial conversations through enterprise trials, through to deployments, and then also getting value out of the product as well. And with me today, I've got Aaron. Hi, Aaron. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Hey, John. Thanks. I'm Aaron Rothschild. I'm a product manager here at Mattermost, and I focus on integrations.
Excellent. So thanks for joining. And we sent out the abstract before, so hopefully that caught your attention and got you joining. We're going to focus on a few things in our talk. Obviously, with remote working being more prevalent at the moment, we're going to talk about how we can make remote teams use messaging more effectively, focusing on integrations, culture, and we'll dig into each of these areas in a little detail as we progress. But firstly, what we wanted to find out was, I wanted to do a quick poll to see where you're self-isolating today. I'm in Los Angeles. Aaron, where are you?
I'm in Truckee, California, Lake Tahoe.
Nice, okay. So you should have the poll pop up for a few seconds, so it'd be great to hear your responses. Great, okay. Let's move on with the agenda. So first off, we're going to focus on sharing some of our remote working experiences and kind of build that into how we develop products and services remotely with Mattermost being a remote first company. Some bits we'll talk on are more culture related, and then we'll kind of progress more into the software development, and as we progress into how we integrate with the Atlassian suite, and then also into DevOps release process as well. So we wanted to kind of just share some of our remote working experience. I've worked remotely for a number of years now, and in a couple of scenarios and a couple of organizations. So I've worked where I've been more of the exception rather than the rule. So where I've been a remote worker, you know, in field sales, working with customers, working on customer sites. And I've transitioned now to Mattermost, which is remote first, where everyone's remote. We meet online on Mattermost and we meet on Zoom. In fact, Aaron and I had worked together for 6 months before meeting. So Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit more about what remote first means in Mattermost?
Yeah, sure. So at Mattermost, we've got this concept of remote first, and remote first is really about sharing one principle, which is courtesy. And essentially, as a remote first organization, we're impartial as to where people are based, whether it's in an office, a co-working space, a coffee house, all that's okay, but it's really about having a philosophy of being courteous to others and following etiquette for discussions, calls, video meetings, giving and receiving feedback in an appropriate manner. And it really means that we'll accommodate people who prefer to work outside of a dedicated office. So we're remote first, but not remote only. Personally, the biggest difference that I see when I work at a remote first company when I moved to Mattermost was meetings generally start right on time. There's no people who are, oh, just wait a few minutes, we're waiting for someone to get out of the meeting room before we can join the conference call. That just doesn't happen anymore. So that's one of my favorite things working at a remote first company.
Yeah, and I'd say as we're connecting usually on Mattermost or Zoom, that kind of courteousness aids openness, I think, as well. So you feel free to reach out to people a lot more readily, I think, definitely in the way the structure of the organization is set up. And I think with remote working in this climate, that openness really helps as well.
Definitely. It also helps that everybody's on the same page. I think that's the thing. We're all generally at home now, which brings some difficulties and challenges, but that's what we're here to talk about today.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. Um, Wanted to just post up a little poll as well and see how familiar you are with remote working. So it'd be good to get your responses as well. Great. Okay, so wanted to kind of move on to developing products and services remotely. And what I want to just show now is I'll bring up our contributors Mattermost team. So we're an open source community, and so we've been developing the product for a number of years, and we've learned a few things by having that open source community, which we think can apply to any organization. So there's a couple of bits that I'll kind of reference here. So firstly, open forums are really useful. So if I click on here in the channel, we've got an Ask Anything channel. And if you're somebody signing into Mattermost for the first time, it's a good place that you can easily find answers to anything that you want, or you can find expertise and get pointed in the right direction. So for us, from our contributors, when they're coming to contribute to the open source project, they can come in here and they know that they can be helped out. And that kind of plays to your point, Aaron, around courteousness as well. If you want to ask more specific questions, then we have other forums that are more specific. You can ask general questions of our R&D team. So we know that our product managers will be on here, our developers will be on here. So you know that it's kind of more team specific as well. And then just wanted to show as well, we use naming conventions to make it really easy. It's a simple but effective way of getting people into the right channel at the right time to have those good conversations. So Aaron looks after plugins, and we've got a number of plugins here that they're actively developing. And then if you want to contribute to our core product as well, then you've got the core products around cloud or mobile or server. So some simple ways to get people engaged and get people working quickly and effectively is having open forums that people can ask questions in, having targeted forums for certain groups and teams, or then targeting around specific products or projects that you're working on. Just going to switch over to another environment just to show something that's more kind of culture related. So we have an announcements channel internally in Mattermost, and so what you can see here is that we have a Celebrate bot. And what we tried to do, being remote working, it's hard to bring people together, but what we're trying to do is celebrate success. And we can do that using Mattermost. So we use Salesforce to track our deals. And when a deal gets closed, it posts a message into the channel, which is great. So you can look at the cool companies that you might be working with, and you can also post a reaction in if you want to. This is nice because it's a feedback loop for the account executive as well, so they can get celebrated on the deal. And if we're bringing on interesting customers, you know, it could be a video games company like Bungie, or it could be space exploration company, then people get to hear about it, which creates a nice buzz. The other bit that we use it for is kind of more sober comments, which is around security, for example. So we use it for top-down communication. So here we've got an increased volume of phishing attempts, so our security officer is able to notify everybody and also advise them of the right actions to be taking as well. You can see as well just at the bottom that this channel is read-only, so we've got channel moderation settings that you're able to define what people can and can't do in the channel. So if you purely want it to be top-down communication, then you can do that, so only specific people with permissions can post in the channel. Another one kind of focusing more on technical scenarios is around service desks. So as you can see, it can be set up for alerting, but also what we use it for is again, another integration between two systems. So We use Zendesk to receive all of our support@mattermost.com emails and manage our tickets. We have an integration that sends the email message over to the channel. So this means that we can see responses from our support engineers, but also we can see tickets raised by our customers as well. So if you've got people outside of the service desk organization, they can do a search against the hashtag or against a customer name to see if anything's been raised against them. So that's a quick way for people outside the service desk to see what's going on, and also to reduce costs, so you don't have to buy Zendesk licenses or service desk licenses if you don't need to. The other bit, as I was showing here, was alerts, and we'll come back to this later, as we've got the Opsgenie integration set up and configured in this channel as well. So you're able to manage your out of hours service desk directly from Mattermost as well. So Aaron, I think you're going to talk a little bit about customer feedback.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just really thinking, this is a great, I think, segue from customer service, right? Where we've got tickets coming in from Zendesk to also collecting and distilling customer feedback that can come in through a variety of different ways. Certainly we capture feedback coming in through support tickets and so on. But one of the ways that we leverage Mattermost as well is through a customer feedback forum. So we've got a channel that's dedicated to that. What we tend to do, whether CSMs take notes here, other product managers, all these notes, we have some habits that we try to use and try to make it easier for everybody to leverage this information. So just as an example here, we've got customer calls. So when we're talking with customers, we'll add this hashtag. In Mattermost, when you click on one of those hashtags, it quickly actually shows you search results for all the other posts that have that hashtag. So for example, it makes it easy for me to switch between prospect and customers. So if I want to look at a prospect feedback, now I'm looking at prospect feedback and it's all centralized. Obviously we have threaded conversations, we can talk about all that. But what we also tend to use and mark for processing is a product called Product Board, which helps us as PMs distill this information. So that's just an example. You'll notice that we also have the Jira integration, which John will be showing later on. But this just makes it as part of our like a helper process so that I know what to do next, and it makes it easy as part of my daily workflow as a product manager. So really like another example of this might be, for example, from a DevOps perspective, oftentimes documentation comes up. So in conversations, you might have situations where people are saying, I can't find this in the documentation. Another example of an integration that we've made is using something called dockup, which is basically a request for something to be documented. So those are just some examples of with our customer feedback and how we incorporate that into our workflow as product managers. So those habits were those hashtags, and for customer calls, customer recordings, the segment of the audience. So if it's open source or enterprise, for example. Another habit I try as a PM is I try to make sure I'm mentioning people if there's something to be done so that things don't fall through the cracks. So that's an important aspect, I think, of using customer feedback in a chat context. Additionally, sometimes we can assign things using a to-do plugin, which I'll get to in a second here. But as a PM, a big part of my nature is oriented around the team's organization, the process rituals, like in a Scrum format, and having the team engaged on a regular basis. So I think about daily rituals on a regular basis, and they're a lot easier to execute on when there's some structure to them. And so we use some helpful tools, and there's a lot of different tools available for Mattermost. But I'm just going to show just an example here. So I'm going to go into this is my product, let's say Product Phoenix. What I'm just going to go through real quick is actually, I can do we've got a tool called Stand Up Raven. And this is, a usual dev Scrum team. You'll have people joining every day. We work across different time zones. So this helps get us all on the same page, and we don't all have to physically get into a meeting room at the same time. But basically what's walking me through here is the typical, like, what happened today? Lots happened today. And then what am I going to be doing today? Tasks. And then is there anything blocking me right now? Not right now. Right? Now, when these are all submitted as a team, they actually get shown to the rest of the team as well at a certain time. So actually, for example, this team, it's usually between 7 and 10 a.m. that we do our stand-up. So my stand-up will now be posted at the next stand-up meeting, basically, and people can parse through that. Keeps everybody on the same page, helps keep a sense of momentum, and there's a window of time that you can do it rather than like we're all getting on a phone call at the same time. It really helps do things asynchronously. And speaking of that, what I also do is we use a plugin called Agenda, and I can queue items from my next meeting. So for example, like let's discuss that bug that came up. This is now going to basically create a hashtag in here for my particular team and to discuss a bug. That means we can go off and discuss it for right now and have, you know, we can discuss at our weekly meeting. And at our weekly meeting, when it comes around, really all I do is basically I say, let's queue up the items for discussion, and we start from the bottom and we go up. And then we can take notes, and those are action items, basically become part of our team's history and how we've made decisions and so on. And finally, another tool that I personally use a little bit is the to-do plugin. And this really just lets me do things like, for example, I can say, oh, you know what, I needed to review this particular item. So I can actually add it to my to-dos. It'll include a link and everything to that conversation, so I remember what it was about. And I can optionally actually assign it to someone else in Mattermost and ask them to do it. So this is just another plugin that I use on a daily basis just to keep track of things I need to do and things that I might be asking some of my teammates to take care of. Last little tool that I find is really helpful in a team format like this when we're developing software is making it easy to also just call in people and make a Zoom. So we use Zoom internally. We also have a WebEx plugin, but this will just basically start a Zoom meeting. I'm not going to click it now because it'll kick me out of this webinar. But everybody then can join it, and it tells us how many people have joined and how long the meeting went on for. So that in a nutshell is kind of how I deal with some of the key DevOps pieces of collecting customer feedback. One aspect that I'd like to touch on that I think is really important too is like productive recognition of people. You know, oftentimes when you're remote, you're not bumping into people in the hallway saying like, hey, it was a great job you worked on last week. I really like that new feature you developed or things like that. So I really try to encourage active recognition of other people. One way we do that, for example, is with our open source community. We have a regular monthly poll for our developers to pick our MVP of the month from our community of open source contributors. And we engage with them that way. We send them mugs and little physical items of swag. Also for employees as well, recognize people for doing a great job, whether it's going above and beyond with customers, you know, staying up late to fight a bug or handling a P1 issue on a weekend. You know, those are things that you can easily send out thanks for and recognition, and really encourages engagement amongst the team. I'm curious, John, you've been working remotely for a while, right? So like, are there any things that you find that help keep you sane when you're working remote?
I think the biggest difference that I've noticed working for Mattermost as opposed to working with other customers or other organizations is default on for camera for Zoom. So definitely previous places I worked for a number of years and I only saw people's bad profile photos. So I mean, one, you can't kind of read what they're saying from the responses, facial responses, but also if you go into an office, you can't actually find them anyway because they look nothing like their picture. So I'd say having the video on makes it more personal and helps to build relationships as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I definitely see a big change when you get everybody on video. And I've been noticing that a lot more since people have been working remote, which has been a great change. For me, some of the other, rituals that are important in a software development context really are also, having things that aren't related to software, things like social channels. So things at Mattermost, a very popular channel is our pet channel. I'm looking at one of my colleagues right now, and her photo has a picture of her dog there. But we also have cooking channels, skiing channels, all sorts of stuff, basically to connect across that remote divide. We've also started having some remote events like trivia nights, happy hours, that sort of thing. Try using the Zoom room feature. It's interesting how you can make it a lot more engaging. And another thing that we've noticed, and we've actually noticed a lot of requests from customers actually, like number of votes for features, is being around animated GIFs. We do have that capability already, and we have several options in terms of plugins, but it really helps when you're trying to express some feelings. Those animated GIFs can really help with that as well. So try to do that. I'd say the recap of this section is really engage with your teammates, make your process no-brainers with helpers and plugins that really help guide people with your process, rather than trying to have to remember it off the top of their head or going off to a document somewhere. Bring it right into the tools that they're using is the best way to kind of get people to do those things. And maybe let's shift gears back into work mode now and think about how quickly we can react to like some incidents as a team. John, you're gonna show us some stuff here.
Thanks, Aaron. So yeah, we're going to kind of shift into more into the kind of technical stream around how you manage incidents, and also kind of showcase some of the integrations that we've got with the Atlassian suite. So I'll just kind of move over to my back to my demo environment. And as kind of referenced earlier, we've got our service desk channels set up, and what we can see is that we've had an alert come in here. It's for our service called Phoenix, and there's an alarm associated with that service in AWS, I think in our US East data center. So what's happened there is that a SNS alert has been sent over to OpsGenie, and then we've got the OpsGenie integration set up, which we kind of showed some of the slash commands up here earlier. What we're able to do with that alert is we can just go in, if you're the service desk person, and you're able to acknowledge that. And so send that and update the incident within OpsGenie directly from Mattermost. So you're minimizing some of your context switching there. You may have done some investigation at a kind of first line or second line, and you're thinking, okay, well, we need to actually hand this over to another team. So let's look at escalating this alert. What we're able to do directly from here is create a JIRA issue as well. So this brings up the modal for us to be able to select the necessary project to put that in. So we've got a DevOps incident. It's only showing the projects that I've got permissions based on my JIRA account as I've connected that. So it wouldn't show you anything that you don't have permissions for. Issue type, we'll create it as a task, and we'll ask them to do an investigation. I can put a priority associated with that as well, and go forward and create that as an issue. As we can see, the plugin updates the channel, and we've got a hyperlink in there which takes us directly through to the new issue that's been created in JIRA. We can see here it's got the relevant information, so the priority that you set, the name that you gave it, obviously, but also with the plugin it's bi-directional, so we can create it in Mattermost, but we can also make modifications in JIRA, and then they're kind of posted back into Mattermost as well. So if I assign that to myself, We can see that messages are kind of popping up on the Mattermost side. And if I go into the product Phoenix channel, I'm able to see a bit more detail on that. So I can see the ticket, the investigation. I have a link which takes me back to the actual original message in Mattermost as well. So there's a nice link between all of the messages there. So it's very trackable between the systems and between the channels. And you can see that it's been assigned to myself. So say I'm a developer working on this and I know that we've been pushing through new releases. I can go into our build channel where we've got Jenkins hooked up, and we're using our Jenkins integration here to actually manage and run builds. And we can see that a build was run for 5.22 recently. So I know that I've got my Bitbucket repo set up. So within our channel header, you can put multiple bits of information. So Aaron kind of referenced earlier the stand-up schedule that we've got. But also we've got the Bitbucket repo linked here as well. So if I just click on that, that'll take me through to Bitbucket, and I've got a link through to the config file that we need to look at. So as I've worked on this, I know immediately that actually we updated our certificates the other day. So I should put it to the new version of the certificate, and I'm suspecting that's one of the problems that we've got. So if I create it as a pull request and look to commit that, and we can merge that back through to master and close that. So this is us making changes in Bitbucket, but what's happening at the same time is that these changes are being notified again into the product channel for all those working on the Phoenix project. So you can see that changes have been made into the code, and now what we want to do is push a build. So if we go to Jenkins channel and we go to run a build, we can run the repair config build directly from Mattermost, and again that's bringing the information back into the channel. We've got bidirectional plugins here, so again minimizing that context switching. And if I'm a developer just in the product channel, I'm getting notified by successes. You can configure that on the Jenkins side, what webhooks information and events it's going to be posting into the channel. So we know that was successful, so that's a good sign. So we can go back to the service desk now, and what we might be able to do actually, if we just go into our status, we can see that's still set to do. We could actually transition that if we wanted to from a Jira perspective as well. So you have the capability to manage multiple parts of your workflow using the Jira plugin as part of this. So we've completed the resolution. We've gone through and resolved some of the issues, and what we can look to do is kind of close off what we've done from a Opsgenie perspective. So we've got our alert posted in there as well, and we can go through and close the escalated alert. So just to recap, we've got a number of integrations that we're working with here, and the scenarios around incident management where you've got a problem that's raised through via SNS or other notification through to Opsgenie. Opsgenie is then notifying Mattermost, and you're able to acknowledge that and manage and integrate with the Opsgenie service directly from the Mattermost UI. You can escalate that into Jira and create a Jira issue associated with that, managing the transition or the assigning of the issue directly from the UI. You can then fix the code by going into your Bitbucket repository and then push a build directly from Jenkins and ultimately close down that incident. So going from incident creation to incident completion, hopefully in a relatively short period of time. So that kind of concludes a bit just on managing incidents with the Atlassian suite. I was going to hand over to Aaron to talk a little bit more about how we manage releases and the DevOps release process.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so from a release perspective, I've been really impressed since I've come to Mattermost because the release process they've got and we have is very mature, and we've gone through an ongoing set of iterations. Oftentimes, in my experience, you know, being in an office, you'll have a whiteboard that's tracking some key dates like, you know, code freeze and you know, the ship date and so on. But that's, you know, obviously better and doesn't work when you're remote. So we bring that into a channel. And in the channel, you know, we've had some learnings, let's call it, some challenges that, you know, in the release process that we've encountered before. Things like, you know, I'm sure this has happened to other people, but missing a test build because it goes through at the last minute, for example. Something wasn't documented in our API that did get released, for example. That's not such a big impact, but there's other ones like we released a breaking change without announcing it accidentally. Also, a common thing that I found is, you know, developers sometimes are just like, oh, I didn't know today was code freeze. So how do you make everybody aware of those kind of key dates and key stages as part of that release pipeline? Is something that what we've done is we use what's called a release room. And basically, release room can really help as a central place to organize all those cross-functional teams like support, the QA team, you know, even sales and marketing. But really the singular purpose of getting a software release out the door successfully and doing it repeatably. That's the nice thing I think about having a release room here. So I've put some examples. I'm just, oh, there we go. Scroll up. I put some examples of what we do. So just here with our code freeze, for example, this goes out 5 working days before the code freeze so that everybody knows. What does that mean? And we kind of call out the different people. So the release manager, what should they be doing? What's our QA team supposed to be looking for at this point? Documentation for PMs and so on. And then over time, what happens is they start to look like this because the release manager is basically going off and checking things off as they get done. So these start to come at us at the appropriate time. So T-minus 20 working days. So we should be focusing on bug fixing at this point, for example, right? You know, T-minus 0 working days is release day and all of our stuff you'll notice is done right there. And this gives us a really great overview of actually all the stuff that we've done over time to work towards this release. So it acts as a great kind of log of the things that we've done and also helps us with learnings when we go forward as well. So some of the things, for example, like you know, showing that checklist, but what we also do is some of the things that John noted, like for example, when a new Android release comes out as a binary, it goes into our release room so that the QA people, everybody's looking at that and that's a new release, that's what we need to test. So we try to make it kind of the central place for everything around a release. And it's really how we kind of judge ourselves as well and keep track of that process over time. One thing you can definitely do from here is great too, is have release parties. So using like the Zoom tool to just create a, you know, at release day, maybe have a happy hour, a few drinks or something like that. That's a real great opportunity. And that's obviously the exciting part of software development is getting software out the door. So that kind of, that's the important part to me of the learnings from the release room. John, what do you think? Any thoughts on that? Hey, so I think that actually brings us to the end here. Maybe we should open up to questions. I think that's what's next. There we go. Do that.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So from questions, we've already had one in. It's a bit of a layup for you. So will we see an option to comment on a Confluence page from Mattermost?
Okay, so that's a great question, very timely. We're just releasing our Confluence plugin this week as well to our marketplace. The question is basically, just so I'm clear on it, you have a page, it comes up into your conversation bar in Mattermost, and someone's made the comment of like, this is a great idea, but I think something. The idea here is to be able to comment on that comment without leaving Mattermost and commenting on that Confluence article. And that is something that we have actually had requests for. It's not in the current release right now. This is kind of like our 1.0. So it's really focused on just getting notifications and subscriptions into specific channels. But that is definitely something I'd be happy to chat more about as well. So I think I can get whoever's name asked it, and I'll reach out to you actually afterwards. If anybody else is interested in speaking with me about features like that, I'm also happy to talk about them at any time.
Cool. We've got a couple more coming in. So are you working with files in Mattermost? I'm assuming is that meaning files from document management services, or I don't know if you want to just talk about some of our file handling integrations that we've got at the moment, Aaron.
Yeah, sure. So today we handle some files natively, like PDFs. You know, you can just view them directly within Mattermost. So other ones that we're looking at are like Microsoft Office file formats, where we actually need to do a conversion into a PDF and then show it in Mattermost so that those can be previewed, for example. Our file handling capabilities, through our plugin and integration architecture, we have an integration, for example, with Collabora or Nextcloud that actually lets you edit files that have already been uploaded into Mattermost. So they're stored in Mattermost, and you can go and edit them and update them through a web interface in Collabora, for example. So there is access to those files, previews, and there's API access to those files as well.
Cool. Another one that's come in. How did the completed task show as strike through in the release room?
So that's just a quick markdown trick. All you need to do is put the double, the word for it is escaping me, but I will use this squiggly line thing. Tilde?
Tilde, yeah.
Tilde, there you go. So you use two of those at the beginning and two of those at the end of the line that you want to have struck out, and that will do that. So it's a good tip.
And another integration one, have you ever tried or seen a SAP integration?
I've, in my lifetime, yes, seen
SAP
integrations for sure, but not with Mattermost directly. But knowing what I know, it's certainly possible. It really just depends. So for example, what comes to mind when someone asks me that is, do you want to have something that's just producing, like, that's a command line or a notifier that's maybe driven by events in SAP, for example, which would be relatively easy, probably using webhooks and some middleware. I think the other side to it is also like in a bot scenario where there's vendors like core.ai, Kore.ai, and they have a Mattermost connector, for example, to build bots, and then can also hook into like SAP, for example, as a data source. So you can get a bit fancier and start making like intents and understanding natural language and so on. So there's it depends is the answer, obviously, with SAP. But there's definitely different things that we can do with it.
And yeah, we've had another question that kind of goes back to the demo a little bit. So I'll just flick back to there. It's asking about what the icons are here. So yeah, correct. This is a GitHub integration as well. So we have a number of integrations with different code repository tools. So GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. And so you can see here, we've hooked this up to a repo that we've created for this purpose. And I've got an open pull request in there, and I can kind of refresh. And then there's slash commands associated with it as well. Don't know if you want to add anything on that, Aaron.
No, I think the one thing, actually, if you could just click on your one pull request there, what's nice about it, about that integration is that it shows it up on the right hand side there. So you don't, it helps me kind of with less context switching. So that's one of the things I really appreciate about it. And it also flags when I have a review, that little yellow dot. If anyone's doing GitHub reviews, it helps you kind of visualize all of them in one place without shifting over to GitHub all the time. So I find that really helpful.
Cool. And another question, are there any plugins that you would recommend for small businesses to try out when starting with Mattermost?
That depends. I would say, to me, the thing that always comes to mind is what are some of the key drivers in your business? So what's your tech stack? So when someone says like, what do you run at your office? You know, whether it's Atlassian or G Suite or Microsoft Office 365 that people use on a daily basis, those are usually the ones that you want to start with because they'll probably give you the most bang for the buck in terms of what people are doing all the time. So for that, you know, us being in a development context here, Jira is a very popular plugin, GitHub, GitLab. Those are the ones, if you are using or have an account with those and you have Mattermost, you should be loading that up. It should be kind of default. I think that there's also, if you go to our plugin marketplace, we are starting to load more of our plugins and also community-based plugins. So the best place to always kind of look for plugins is directly within Mattermost. Go to the main menu and go to plugin marketplace. From there, the one that I find gets overlooked sometimes is AutoLink. It just helps make your life easier and can link things like to Zendesk tickets or to Jira tickets without having to copy and paste the URL all the time and maybe just mention by number. So those are some to check out in there. Yeah, and if there's any that you are interested in, there's also integrations.mattermost.com, which is a broad list of plugins that maybe haven't got to our marketplace yet, but it's also possible to suggest ones there. So please, your feedback's always welcome. Also in our forums.mattermost.com too.
We've got a couple more questions. So it's asking about translations in the plugins and hopefully looking to improve those. Is that something you're looking at, Aaron?
That is fantastic timing. We literally had a conversation about this yesterday in my integrations meeting as one of our agenda items that was brought up by our team internally.
Are you sure this isn't somebody in your team raising this question?
Maybe it is someone on my team. If it is,
yeah,
you know,
great.
This is providing feedback for that. But the short answer is right now we don't do a great job of, you know, we're amazing. We've got translated into 17 languages on the main web app server for Mattermost. And we've started looking at how do we help do that with plugins and make a framework for that to help that internationalization. Because I have seen, for example, some folks even convert our plugins into Japanese, for example. It makes it much easier for native language speaking users, obviously, in that case. So I don't have a definitive plan as to what we're doing. It's something that's come up. If it's possible, I'd really love to connect with you after this, whoever asked that question. So you can reach me at aaron@mattermost.com, or maybe I'll be able to get your contact information after this. So thank you for the question.
Great, thanks, Aaron. A couple more. Is there a way to integrate Mattermost with WhatsApp outside of WhatsApp for Business?
That is a fascinating question. I don't know the answer to off the top of my head because it just hasn't come up before. So I'll have to loop back on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when WhatsApp does get brought up in our conversations with customers. Often they're looking at Mattermost to replace it, not integrate with it. You know, we can provide that kind of private mobile experience, and you're owning and controlling the data and in control of the encryption as well. So often we're being looked at as a replacement for that for business usage. But thanks for raising it. We've got a note of all the questions, so we can always follow up after these as well. Okay. Are there any plans to add support for configuring plugins via the UI which require JSON configuration?
Sorry, so can you repeat that again, John? Because
Yeah. Are there any plans to add support for configuring plugins via the UI?
so
It says which require JSON configuration, but
okay. I think that's the parentheses almost of. So in the past, for example, like autolink, custom attributes as well required you to have access to the config.json file in order to really put the configuration changes in there. We do have a database option for that, which is another approach. So if you maybe wanted to give people database access to actually control those configurations, would be one approach maybe as well. We have also, though, just last week released the plugin marketplace custom attributes with a small version bump that now actually has a UI for configuring that in the system console. So John, actually, you know what, you can quickly, I think I've got it in this instance here. If you just go to, the plugins area in the system console. Oh, you're not a system admin.
No, this is just as a user. I could bring up a system administrator if you want.
Okay, no worries. I can talk to you in the meantime. But so in the system console, you will be able, you are able to now configure custom attributes without touching the config.json file. We also made a change to autolink a few months ago where it's all command line driven. So it's all slash commands to configure autolink. You don't need access to the config.json file anymore. And that's generally our approach that we're taking going forward. We won't make plugins that are configured in the config.json file because we've also added, so just as you go down here,
is that
for developers,
option there?
Yeah, that example. So in this view where you're looking at as a system console, the plugin developers can actually control what this looks like now, and they can make their own custom UI components. So you could put like a Google map here and say, choose where on the world you are. Whereas before we would have only allowed you to enter your coordinates as a piece of text. So that's something that we've improved recently. So generally most new plugins that I see are being configured through the system console rather than through config.json. So I hope that answered the question. Feel free to, once again, reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions offline.
Yeah, thanks. And the next one is around plans to change the look and feel of the channel bar on the left. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we've gone through, released a number of changes in 5.22. So I think some of the bits you're referencing there are reducing space between channel names and changing font, which I guess from a feature perspective isn't kind of part of the release that we've had there, but we are going through a lot of UI changes at the moment and UX changes. So we've added this capability for the filtering based upon unread into the left-hand channel sidebar, and also around browsing for channels. We've added that capability there, and the Control K jump to for a channel. And so I'd say there's a number of changes that are coming up around the UI over time, which you'll see. And also, if you want to comment as well and get involved with that, on our community side, we've got some channels that you can definitely get involved with as well. So if you've got points around making it more compact, then we'd definitely love to hear them. Okay. Right, so I think that's gone through all the questions. So thank you everybody for your time today. Really appreciate you listening to us and asking questions and getting involved. Please learn more at the link that we've got here. Get in touch over Twitter. You can also join our community instance as well. And I think there's a question about the recording, so I'll see if we're able to share that out as well. Thanks for your time, Aaron. It was good hanging out with you.
As always, John. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.